All right, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar entitled Prepare for Impact, Succession Planning. This is part 2, Selling to Family, Selling to Members. My name is Brian Munson. I am the Business Development and .coop Sales Manager for NCBA CLUSA. I will be today's webinar moderator. Your webinar today is co-hosted by Castle Wealth Advisors. They are an associate member of NCBA CLUSA, and we've known them for a long time, and they do great work. Prepare for Impact, just for a little bit more on our webinar series, is exclusive to NCBA, and it actually it's meant to explore the key issues that will shape our upcoming Co-op Impact Conference. The Impact Conference will be held October 4th through the 6th in Alexandria, Virginia. And given that succession planning is actually one of the top challenges that is listed by our purchasing co-op members that are planning to attend this conference, we thought we wanted to have this discussion with you, the members of our members. NCBA CLUSA improves the more that our co-op members improve, and so the only way that they can get better is by acting on really what's important to you, all the folks that are on this this webinar. And so, you know, part 2 of this 3-part series will focus today on the finer points of transitioning ownership of your business to either family members or to other members within your co-op. As a quick heads up, part 3 is actually going to take a deeper look at transition options, specifically worker co-op conversions, and of course roll-ups. We'll have a few of our executives that are members of NCBA, executives of those purchasing co-ops, talking a little bit about those and their experiences in that area. So we look forward to you joining us for that session, and that will happen in early August. Before we begin today, just a quick bit of housekeeping. You'll notice that your phone lines are muted during the presentation to reduce background noise. There will be a chance, of course, to pose questions, just not verbally. So if you have a question, type it into the question box on the GoToWebinar control panel that you'll see on your screen. The questions will be collected and answered as time allows at the end of the program. We are currently recording this program, so it will be archived on our website. You will receive an email containing the link for the recording, and we'll, of course, follow up when the link has been posted to our website. Either way, you can feel free to listen to it again when you get that link, share it with friends, family, coworkers, whoever you think would be important. So our panelist today is Gary Pittsford. He is the CEO of Castle Wealth Advisors. Gary is a certified financial planner and has over 3 decades of comprehensive fee-only financial advisory experience. He's been a featured speaker at many purchasing co-op and industry-specific conventions, ours a few times. He does a lot of writing for national publications and actually just recently published a book, Your Family Business, Your Family Net Worth. It brings together all of his best practices into one comprehensive read, and it's a great book for anybody out there looking to improve their knowledge on that subject. So Gary can tell you a little bit more about himself if the conversation merits it, of course, and I want to turn it over to him right now so we can dive into the topic today, selling to family or selling to a co-op member. Gary?
Thank you, Brian. It's good to be with you again. I'm glad that several people are listening. I hope that we can get some information to those listeners about transition planning, succession planning, exit planning, whatever you want to call it, pertaining to their companies and their co-ops. There's one thing about co-ops is that they take great care of their members, and with all the co-ops that we work with, every member always wants to stay within the co-op. They never want to sell to somebody else, and if at all possible, they love working with their purchasing cooperatives, and it's a great relationship between the co-op and all the members that belong. And as you know, some co-ops have 200 or 300 members. Some co-ops have 5,000 or 6,000 members, but they all work very well trying to take care of their members. So let's talk about the members. Let's talk about the family business owner. What you wanted to concentrate on today is selling within the family, or if the children don't want to be in the business, they picked a different career, then we could talk about selling to another co-op member. Brian, what's the next slide? This is just a simple piece of paper that just shows some of the names of some of the co-ops that we've worked with over the years. I'm very lucky that I get to go back to a lot of these people and talk to them once a year, twice a year, but I keep in close touch with all the members and I know what's happening within their industries. Anyway, that's just some of the companies. They're not all on there, but a lot of them are on that page. What's next, Brian? Okay, let me talk just briefly. Being the owner of a family health business, I think, is a great opportunity. It's a great way to build your net worth. It's great for the family. We have a lot of families that we work with where the second generation is buying out the first, or the fifth generation is buying out the fourth. We're working on one situation right now where the seventh generation is buying out the sixth generation. So that's a very old family business. But the challenges that business owners have, and the first point up there is that about half of everybody listening on the phone today is over the age of 60. The other thing, the second one, is that the problems that we have to work with, and as we go through all of this, think of a giant blueprint, and we're trying to build this blueprint to fit the family business. So part of the blueprint has to do with the business succession, all of the financial numbers, all of the transitioning of stock. You know, how do I move the stock? What's the gifting? What are the tax implications if I give stock to my children? So the business is part of it, and then the other part of it is the family. Now, a lot of people will tell me, well, I've got 3 children. One of them wants the company, but I want to be fair to the other 2. So how do I give away or sell my largest business, my largest asset, to one child, but how do I treat the other 2 fair? And there's dozens of ways to do that. We've been through every idea that you can think of. The third item on there is where will the future income come from? Business owners are always concerned when I meet them for the first time is if I sell my business, I no longer have a salary, I no longer have a bonus, I no longer have a company that's paying for my cell phone or my car or my travel or my benefits. You know, so how do I design my income for the future? And we'll get into that in about 10 or 15 minutes. And then how do I protect my net worth? So I want to sell the business, but I want to keep my net worth. I've been building it for 30 or 40 years, so I don't want to lose a lot of my net worth. So how do I do that? So those are a lot of the things that we're going to try and weave together in this blueprint so that you can see how to protect yourself in the future. Brian, can you go to the next one? This is what I call there's 28 million of us around the country that own our own businesses, and that 28 million people are a giant economic engine for the country. So a lot of people think of Walmart or General Electric or Exxon, but they do contribute to the company. But when you take 28 million private business owners and you add them all together, it's a giant economic engine that drives this country. As you can see on there, it's about 20 million that have 1 to 4 employees, about 7 million have less than 20 people, and about 500,000 have over 20 employees. Over 70 million people work for these business owners, and the most important thing to me is that bottom point is that every time that 10 people in the United States get hired, about 6 or 6.5 out of 10 go to work for a privately held family business. So most of the employees, if 1 million people get hired in the next 2 or 3 months, most of them, about 60 to 64%, will go to work for these 28 million businesses. So we're a giant economic engine that drives this country. I wanted you to know that you're a big part of that. Brian, what's next? Now, we talk about the value of the business, the benefits of being in a family business. I just wanted to point out a few things. If you have children that are wanting to take over your company and you're listening, or maybe you've got children that are also listening in. Here's some things that is a huge benefit to the children that maybe the business owner didn't have when he started 30 or 40 years ago. But when the children take over the company, they've got established sales. I can look at the last 5 years and I can see what the sales were. They've got assets that are paid for. You're not starting brand new with buying computers and shelves and a forklift and a delivery truck. Everything is already in place. You've got well-trained employees that know how to run each division of the company that they're responsible for. You've got repeat customers that come through the door all the time. One of my companies is Castle Valuation Group, and we do about 100, maybe a little over 100 valuations every year. And we've been doing it for, I don't know, 18, 20 years. So we've done thousands of valuations. And one of the advantages is that we have here is that we have the accurate results of the companies that we help put a valuation on, and then we help them sell their company. So when I look at a valuation, I'm looking at the return on appraised value, which is next to the bottom on that page, is between 20 and 24% for most people. Return on appraised value. Return on shareholders' equity, which is on your financial statements. Return on shareholders' equity is usually around between 19 and 25% a year. Those are excellent returns for running a business. There are money managers on Wall Street that would kill to have those kinds of returns year in and year out. So when you look at the total business, you've got an opportunity to make an excellent return on your investment, okay, which helps build your net worth, which helps provide for your family. So there's a lot of good ideas about buying mom and dad's business. So think about all this as you negotiate with your parents to buy out the company if you're listening. Brian, what's next? Okay, these are 6 critical points that every business owner has to work through. And it doesn't matter whether you're selling the company to your children or to another co-op member. You want answers for all of these 6 items, and we're going to go through them quickly over the next few minutes before I run out of time. You need answers for every one of these options, and if you've got it all figured out, then you're 90% done. So Brian, let's go to the first one, which is businesses. Most of you that are listening are S corporations. Some of you might have a limited liability company. A few of you may have C corporations. But if you look at this page, you'll see that all the attorneys and the accountants in the country kind of agree with us that when you have a business, you should either be an S Corp, an LLC, or a partnership. And most of you are going to be S Corps. I usually tell most business owners to have your business, whatever you're selling, in an S Corp, and if you own the real estate, put the real estate in a limited liability company. Never put the real estate in with the corporation. Keep them separate. Over the last 30 years, those 3 areas, which are called pass-throughs, because the profit all passes through to the stockholders, have gone from 10 to 26 million. And C Corps, because they pay an extra tax, C Corps are not desirable anymore in our tax structure that we have in the country today. And now I realize that taxes may be changing with the new administration. I don't know what's going to happen, but we're watching what's happening every day. But C Corps have gone down from 2 million to 1.6, and they'll continue to go down. But with the taxes that we have on C Corps and on individuals, C Corps just aren't desirable anymore for business owners. So one of those 4 or 5 or 6 areas is where your business is located. So we need to know what kind of, if you have an S Corp, we can do certain things. If you have an LLC, we can do certain things. If you have a C Corp, we've got to kind of do things differently in order to minimize taxes on the C Corp. But we need to know what kind of company you have. And that's an important part of designing this blueprint. Brian, what's next? Now let's very quick, I'll give you a quick example of like parents selling the company to their children. This is talking about inside the family. A lot of business owners will have to value the business, and let's say it's worth $1 million. Let me pick a round number. And a lot of parents will say, okay, I'll gift 20, 25, 30% of the stock to the child or 2 children or 3 children that want to take over. You know, we're working with families right now all over the country. One family is the mom and dad are selling to all 4 children, and all 4 children work in the business, and they're all going to have 25% each, which is what mom and dad wants to have, but we're figuring out who's going to be president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, who's going to have what responsibility. So sometimes we'll deal with 4 children. You know, a few years ago I dealt with 11 children. Well, that includes son-in-laws and daughter-in-laws. Sometimes it's 1 person, sometimes it's 2 or 3. But we can gift some of the stock, and you can gift either $14,000 a year or you can gift $5 million. So let me give you a quick example. If I wanted to give my son $400,000 of stock in my business, we would gift him the $400,000, and then we would subtract that from the exemption of $5.4 million. So then once I've subtracted the $400,000, then I would still have $5,090,000 to work with. So those are the numbers. I can use the $14,000 a year, and I can use the $5.4 million to move stock to the next generation. Then let's say I gifted them 25%, then they got to buy the other 75% usually, because mom and dad probably need the profit from this sale in order to protect their retirement income. So my son or daughter could buy that remaining stock of $700,000, and they could sign a promissory note, and they would make payments to me over the next 10 or 20 years. Or they could go to a bank, get an SBA loan, and give me a check, and then they would make payments to the bank for the next 10 or 15 years. So we got 2 different ways of handling that stock sale. So I have installment sale up there, and then I have a possible bank loan. Sometimes if the business is the family's only major asset, and there's 4 or 5 kids, or let's say 3 kids involved, one child would get the voting stock, and then we could issue non-voting stock to the children that's not in the company, and then we design a plan so that the company buys the non-voting stock from the other kids who picked a different profession. And then if there's 2 or 3 people involved, I always try to find out who's going to get voting control. You know, a lot of people want to go 50-50 on the ownership, but I've learned over the years that 51-49 is probably a better idea. Somebody needs to be able to make a final decision. Somebody's got to be a tiebreaker. We've done them at 50-50, but I've also seen a lot of families that fight with each other, and that's why I think 51-49 is probably a better idea. So we always have the discretion, if possible, who's going to have voting control. So these are the things to think about when you're dealing with family, and if there's 1, 2, or 3 in the company, these are the questions that we have to work on. Brian, what's next? Okay, now if we're going to transition it to another co-op member, so the kids have picked a different profession, they don't want to go into the business. So here's some ideas for transitioning to another co-op member. That's usually called a strategic purchase. When you have somebody in the industry buying you out, you're in the same business. The valuation that would be done is a little different than selling it to the family. When you sell out to somebody in your co-op, the cash flow, the EBITDA is a little different. Usually the price might be a little higher because there's more cash to add back. There's more add backs with the company. If you do sell to a co-op, once you guys have agreed to a selling price, usually the other co-op member is going to pay cash. Sometimes it's one check. Sometimes it might be 2 or 3 checks. For example, there's a lot of projects that we do in December. So sometimes we'll put half, the seller would take maybe half the cash in December 31st, and then the other half would be paid on January 2nd. So it's 48 hours later, but the important thing is that it's in 2 different tax years, so we probably can save some taxes by spreading it between 2 different tax returns. The other important things when you're selling to a co-op member is we talk about term sheets or a letter of intent. If we develop a term sheet, or your attorney or your accountant or somebody would prepare that term sheet, it would show what you're selling and what you're going to keep. You know, so if the company owns a car or a pickup truck, you want to keep that. If there's $100,000 in cash in the checking account, you don't want to sell your cash, so you keep the cash. If you have a co-op where you have preferred stock or dividend stock or patronage stock, whatever you want to call it, if you own stock in the purchasing co-op, when you sell your company, you keep that. You know, so like if you're in the hardware industry or the floor covering industry or lots of other industries, the co-ops have you purchase preferred stock in their company, and which is the buying power for the co-op. So when you sell the company, on the term sheet, we'll talk about, well, I'm going to keep my stock in the co-op. I'm going to keep my cash. I'm going to keep my pickup truck. I'm going to keep the artwork in my office. And there may be some other stuff, but we want to list what you're selling. The other important thing to think about is that if you sell the company to your children, they'll probably buy your stock. So if you have 100 shares of stock in your S corporation or C corporation or whatever, your children will probably buy that stock from you. So that would be a stock sale. If you're selling the business to another co-op member, almost every time they're not going to buy your stock. They don't want that liability of owning stock in your business. So it's going to be an asset sale. So right below where it says term sheet, you'll see whether it's stock or assets. And for a co-op, another co-op member, they're going to buy your assets and they'll give you a check. So everything inside your corporation you will flush out and sell to them. And then the only thing you're going to have left is the check that they gave you. So what are you going to keep? What are you going to sell? How much are the assets? The other thing here is that, and I'll bring it up again later, is that when I say what are the assets, that may sound like a crazy idea, but I would say 7 out of 10 people that we work with, when I ask them what's your inventory, your financial statement that you sent me says that your inventory is $500,000. And I said, what's old, what's obsolete, what's your real inventory? And they said, well, I got maybe 50,000 of old stuff, but it really ought to be $200,000 higher or $300,000 higher. So a lot of people have financial statements that show 500,000 and it should be 800,000. So what you got to get all that. When you hand a piece of paper to the buyer, you want to show what are the real assets. You don't want to show what you've been showing on their tax returns and your financial statements the last 10 or 20 years. So what are the assets that we're selling? Accurate assets. And what is the EBITDA, or which is the usable cash flow, of the business? Because what you're selling, for most everybody listening on this telephone line, is that you're going to be selling some assets and you're going to be selling profit, cash flow. And I realize your tax returns always look bad. You want the tax returns to look bad. Your accountants use depreciation and write-offs and all kinds of things to help hold down what's taxable. But when you're selling your company to another co-op member, you want to show all the real cash flow. because that's what they're paying for. They're paying for the profitability. And let me give you an example. If the sales of the company, once again, are $1 million, the tax return probably shows that they had profit of $20,000 to $30,000 maybe on the tax return. But when I start digging in the real cash flow, when I add back all the benefits that the owner's been taking and all the excess, like higher rent or whatever, the real cash flow is probably more like 100 to 150,000. It's not 20 or 30. So you want to show the buyer the higher cash flow, which is real. So assets and cash flow is what you guys need to be thinking about. Brian, what's next? Okay, now when you're thinking about selling the business, as the owner, normally we'll pick 2 or 3 of these ideas to give you solid retirement income. So if you sell the business to your children, the sale of the business, if they pay you over the next 10 or 15 years, that's one source of income. If you sell the business or you give the children a lot, you give them a whole bunch of stock for free as a gift, and then what you might do is charge a consulting fee. You know, so if I could give my business to my children, but then I could make them pay me a consulting fee of, you know, $100,000 a year, $200,000 a year, or whatever. So I may have consulting fees. I might, and that's another way of getting some additional income to mom and dad. If they give away 20 or 30%, they could charge some consulting fees in order to get paid for that gift. A non-compete agreement. The children or the buyer, the other co-op manager, if I'm buying your company for $1 million, what I might do is pay you $900,000 for the business, and I'll pay you $100,000 as a non-compete agreement. You know, so that's another way of getting paid. Also remember that the person paying for that, whether it's the children or the co-op member, that non-compete agreement is tax deductible. Those consulting fees are tax deductible. So you want to be thinking about what's deductible and what's not deductible when you design this blueprint for selling your company. Salary, you know, I could sell my business, but I could still keep working for another 2 or 3 years and get paid a salary. If I own the real estate and let's say I've been charging $10,000 a month in rent, what I could do if I'm selling it to my children, I might increase that rent to $13,000, $14,000 a month for the next 10 years. So I'm moving that income into my LLC that owns the real estate. I've got extra income coming in for retirement, and the buyer, if my children are buying the company, then the children can deduct that rental income. So that's a plus for me, and it's a plus for the children. Director's fees is a possibility. I've been president for 30 or 40 years, so maybe I'll become chairman of the board and let my son or daughter become president, and so I might get director's fees. Hopefully I've got an IRA or a 401k plan, so I'm going to have some retirement assets, and then hopefully I also have some personal assets. We don't have enough time today to talk about that kind of stuff, but these are areas that business owners just don't take advantage of, because for the last 40 years they've always pumped the profit back into the business, and their retirement plans don't have a lot of money in it, and their personal assets, like an investment account someplace, or buy some farmland, or buy some apartment buildings or something, their personal assets just aren't there. So everything revolves around, we got to sell this business for a lot of money so that they can afford to retire. And that's what we have to do for a lot of people. So these are ideas. Usually we'll use 2 or 3 of these ideas in order to give the people selling the company some retirement income. But those are the obvious choices that we use all the time. Brian, go to the next one. This is a brand new slide that I've stuck in because The new administration wants to change taxes. Between now and the end of the year, I don't know if they're going to get tax laws changed or not, but I just want you to know in the top part, under current law, your maximum tax bracket is about 39% plus state. So if you add in the state taxes, a lot of you are paying 44 to 45%. If you live in California, you're probably paying closer to 50% tax. Capital gains is 20%, and we still have a federal estate tax, which is at 40%. Under the new proposed ideas, the federal income tax for individuals, they're talking about 33 to 35% for individuals. So it'd go from 39 to 35 or maybe 33. Capital gains will still be about 20%. So when you sell your stock to your children, you're talking about a 20% tax on the profit. And under the new proposed ideas in the House and the Senate, they're talking about doing away with federal estate tax, so those will be zero. So the federal estate tax that we have now is 40%, and it may go to zero. So I can't give you a lot of tax ideas right now, but hopefully by September, October, we'll have a better idea what the tax laws are going to look like. But you need to be talking to your accountants and your tax attorneys and keep in touch with them about changing tax laws. And if you're thinking about selling your company in 2017, you want to weigh carefully how the taxes are going to be calculated, whether it's under the old system or the new system. So this is kind of a transition year, so keep your eyes open. We'll continue to send out newsletters, but talk to your accountants and your tax attorneys. It's going to be a changing year, and it may happen next year. Brian, what's next? Okay, here's a quick 3-year idea. I've said this to a lot of people at conventions. A lot of people come up to me after a speech or something, and they'll say, Gary, we don't know where to start. We don't even know what questions to ask. What should we be doing? We want to sell in the future, but we don't know what to do. So here's a quick 3-year plan. I'm just going to skip through it quickly, but 36 months before you sell your company, here's something to start with. Clean up your financials. You know, every month I'll get a financial statement from somebody, and it'll show loan from stockholder, or it'll say loan to stockholder. And if that's all been paid off, get that stuff off the financial statement. Get your financial statements looking accurate and clean. The most important thing is to reduce expenses, if you can, over the next 3 years. I usually tell most people, I said, if you can increase your gross margins on your profits, increase your gross margins 1% a year. You know, so if you're at, let's say, 36% gross margin, next year can you get to 37? And the next year can you get to 38? And while you're doing that, can you reduce expenses by 1 or 2% a year? In 3 years, if you could push up margins 1% a year, and if you could reduce expenses 1 or 2% a year, after 3 years of doing that, you've probably increased the value of your company by at least $200,000 to $300,000. Increasing that gross margin and making that EBITDA bigger and bigger is a huge leverage to valuing your business. And then all the add backs. In the last 3 years, keep track of all the add backs. Keep track of if you pay your grandkids to sweep the floors, I want to be able to add that back. If you took a trip to Hawaii, I want to be able to add that back. Your cars, your cell phones, whatever, life insurance premiums, disability premiums, health insurance premiums, all of these things are add backs. So keep a list on a piece of paper in your desk. Keep all of the add backs. This is 3 years before selling. Okay, Brian, go to the next one, which is 2 years. Now we're down to 24 months. Okay, in the next 24 months, work with your employees. When you're selling your company, especially to another co-op member, kind of dancing around the sales price is the #1 priority. But we've kind of agreed on what the sales price is going to look like. The very next question is going to be, tell me about your people. So make sure you got the right people in the right job with the right training. You know, if the co-op provides training for your people for their specific job description, then get all the training you can get, because you want to be able to tell the buyer, I've got excellent people in every division. They're all well trained. They got certificates hanging on the wall. I've got great people. Every employee should have a job description and a salary range. Okay, so those are the things. Start working with your people and get them trained, the right salary, the right job description, get all that done and 2 years out before you sell. Brian, the next one is 1 year out. 1 year out, start cleaning up the building, paint the walls, you know, stripe the parking lot, fill up the potholes, make sure all the signs are working day and night. So when you sell your company, the place looks good, you've got well-trained people, you've got clean financial statements, you've got excellent cash flow or EBITDA, so the buyer doesn't have a lot to complain about. If there's things in there that don't make sense, he's going to or she's going to try and pick a lower sales price. So clean everything up the last 3 years. That's a quick 3-year plan. Brian, what's next? We got about 20 minutes to go. When you start working on this 3-year plan, I suggest that you pick a business attorney, your accountants, and a financial advisor to help you put this blueprint together. You need an accountant that understands the S-corps and the LLCs, that understands all the legal documents. Your accountant needs to know your tax bracket, your children's tax bracket if they're buying you out. The financial advisors normally help the attorney and the accountant put the plan together. The financial advisor becomes very important to you when you sell the company for a big check. You know, we normally tell you that we would suggest that you work with a fee-only person, which means they don't get any commissions. They're fee-only, they function as a fiduciary, they're independent, they don't work for some big company, and they are RIA, which means Registered Investment Advisor with the SEC in Washington. So the important thing is that your financial advisor should be a fiduciary, your accountant is a fiduciary, your attorney is a fiduciary. So all 3 of those people are doing what's best for you. Meet with those people at least 2 hours every year in that last 3 years. Spend 2 hours talking about new ideas, talking about things that can help you sell the business or help you save taxes. Also, a banker is very important if you're selling to the children and you want them to get an SBA loan. So your advisory team is important the last 2 or 3 years to make sure that you get the highest price with the lowest tax. Brian, what's next? These are just some points that we wanted to point out, that if you work with this advisory team and if you're selling to your children, you need to be coaching them on everything they need to know to run this business. So all this planning and all this coaching will produce a stronger business. You'll sell it for a higher value after 3 years of working on this thing. You're going to be better prepared. The next generation, because of your coaching, is going to be better prepared. You'll be able to minimize the taxes on the sale. Your business plan is the blueprint is coming together, and you'll be better prepared for the future. You'll be better prepared to sell the company, and you'll be better prepared after the sale to protect your net worth and your family afterwards. So spending 2 or 3 years working on these ideas produces some real results. Brian, what's next? Oh, we're just wrapping it up here. This is what we do. Some of you have never heard of us. Probably most of you have never heard of us, but Castle Wealth Advisors works with clients in all 50 states in all of this business planning. So that's my one-page advertisement. This is the stuff that we do for everybody. We've been doing it for about, I don't know, 44 years or something, but after 40 years, we're beginning to get it right. Brian, the next page. For those of you that want to read more, if you went to our website, which is castle3.com, if you go to where it says articles and videos at the top of the page, and you go down to the third gold bar, it says business concepts for business owners. If you click on that bar, all kinds of articles will pop up. So you can print off any article that you want to read. And what I'm trying to provide is education in all these different areas. Selling to a co-op member, selling to my children, what kind of wills to have, what kind of trusts to have, what kind of buy-sell agreements to have. You'll find all kinds of things, all kinds of articles where it says for business owners. So you can, that's a library that you can read. Brian, what's next? Brian talked about our book. After 40-some years of doing this, I tried to put some good ideas into a book. You can go to Amazon, or you can contact Amy here at Castle 3 and buy the book and read lots of ideas about everything we've talked about. What's the last page, Brian, is just my email. If you have questions, you can email Gary at Castle 3, or you can go to our website, or whatever. We've been trying to help co-op members for a long time, and we just want to be an educational resource for you. So if you want help, just let us know. And Brian, I think we got about 14 or 15 minutes left. Have you got any questions that have come in?
Yeah. Hey, Gary. Thanks for all that. First of all, we want to officially open up for questions for those that are on the line. You had a lot of information there, but I think we've done a bunch of these webinars, and I really like the way that this was put together. That 3-year plan kind of thing. That's an exceptional, I think, approach that some people should be excited about. Being able to see, here's what I should do: 3 years, 2 years, 1 year. I'll just kick it off with a few questions, maybe to get things going. You mentioned there can be some, I don't want to say infighting, but yeah, when you're selling to a family member, what's the biggest misconception that you found when you're doing a sale within the family? I don't imagine that it would always be easy or comfortable, and that maybe even the paperwork or the lack thereof of paperwork can cause some tension. So what's something to keep in mind when you're selling to a family member?
There's a lot of things that come to mind. It's important. I try and quiz the parents to find out, tell me about your children. If you got 2 or 3 in the company, tell me what they do. What are they good at? Sometimes the kids are good at the computers and the software. Some kids are good with dealing with customers. Some of the children are good with handling advertising, or going to the local chamber of commerce and being involved in the community. So we need to know from the parents' point of view what the kids are good at. That will help us figure out what they should be doing. I try and talk about all that, and I want the parents to help decide which children should be doing what. Another thing that I get stuck doing is dealing with children and in-laws. Over the years, we've worked with quite a few families that have a son working for the company, and then maybe a son-in-law is working for the company. And almost every time, the parents will gift stock to their children. But most parents, I can think of one in the last 40 years, but most parents will gift stock to their children, but not a son-in-law or not a daughter-in-law. So when we have a meeting and I'm talking about this big blueprint and the plans for the future, I'm the one who gets to tell the son-in-law that we're going to give stock to your wife, but we're not going to give any stock to you. So I'm not very popular at family meetings. That's the way it goes, is that because I don't know if they're going to get divorced. I don't know if one of them is going to die in a car wreck. I don't know if one of them is going to have a cancer or something. So families always give assets to their children. So that's just something that we have to build into the plan. And there's always stock redemption agreements or buy-sell agreements in order to protect the stock to help keep it in the family. So understanding the children, understanding their strengths, figuring out who should have 51% or 49, or maybe it's 25% each for all 4 kids. So in the first or second slide, I talked about all the business succession planning. And then I also talked about the family succession planning. So family plays a big part in everything that we do.
Right. Yeah, I think that's good info for people, because my concept would be that there would be some of that tension in there, regardless of whatever kind of paperwork. So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. Prior to that new tax slide that you developed, I think you were talking about retirement strategies. I can go back to it. It was about, you said that there were, retirement income. These are sort of the typical strategies that you use, in this area. Are there any kind of out-of-the-box strategies, outside-the-box strategies that you've seen used to great effect? These obviously are more, sounds like the more popular ones, the more plug and play. But are there any sort of outside-the-box ones that you've seen, folks you've worked with?
Well, there's a lot of crazy ideas. Sometimes, we'll make arrangements to have an asset swap. Maybe we might swap the value of the business for the value of a condo in Florida or something like that. Sometimes what we'll do is have a certain level of income for the father while he's still alive, but then a different level of income for the mother for as long as she lives. So sometimes if the parents are several years apart, like maybe the father is 70 years old and the mother is 60 years old, we need to have, and the husband usually dies first, we need continued income for the wife because she's going to live a lot longer. So a lot of times in these documents, we'll have income at 2 different levels for mom and dad because they're 2 different ages, which are several years apart. So we have to think about not just the father of this organization, but also the mother and how long they're going to live. So a lot of times we have special income levels for 2 different parents.
Sure. Okay. And again, if anybody on the line has any questions, please feel free to send those through. Gary, third question, sort of final one here. We can wrap up after this if nothing else comes through. In terms of the 3-year plan, what piece of that process has the greatest potential to derail somebody's plans to sell? You mentioned training, I think was a big one there, add backs, kind of like the store appearance in the final year. When you look at that 3-year plan, is there something that if it's not done, or if even it's just a component of one of those ideas that isn't completed, it could derail a sale that's being planned, or just the eventual, I got everything in order and I'm going to sell it now? Is anything in there in particular?
Well, there's a couple of ideas that come to mind real quick. First off, a lot of business, not a lot, but I'm going to say 20 or 30% of the people we work with, they barely break even, or they lose money because their expenses have gotten too high and their gross margins aren't keeping up. So as a quick example, if you have a business that has a 39% gross margin and you have a 40% expense ratio, so that means you're losing 1% every year. That's a huge problem because your business is not worth much. You've got to get to the point where I talked about during that 3 years, increasing gross margins 1% a year if you can. So if a business that has a 40% gross margin and a 32% expense ratio and an 8% profit is a valuable company. That's what you've got to get to. Breaking even every year doesn't create value for your company, okay? The other example is your people. You know, years ago, I worked with a gentleman in the Baltimore, Washington area, and he was 74 years old, and he decided he was going to sell the company. And it was a very valuable company. His gross margin was over 50%. He was making a lot of money. I said, okay, now tell me about your people. And he said, I've got 2 great managers. You know, one of them is 71, the other one is 72. I said, what the hell am I going to do? If I buy your business, I'm going to have to hire 2 new people, pay them a lot of money, and I'm going to have to spend the next 4 or 5 years training them. So I'm not going to pay much for your company because your people are too old. Okay, so when you come to selling your company, you sell the business and the income from the business, but you also are selling all of your well-trained people. You know, and one of those, that 71 and 72-year-old, one of them also had cancer. You know, so the people are very important. Good people, well-trained, at the right salary level is very important. You know, making sure that you're making money every year is very important. You know, so breaking even every year is not good. Having old employees is not good. So those are a couple things that can derail the whole thing.
Right. It's good info. Well, I think at this point looks like we're in good shape to put a bow on this one. So, you know, I want to thank you again for you know, preparing all this information for us. For everybody on the line, this webinar has been recorded, and so you will receive a link to that recording likely tomorrow, and again, we'll let everybody know when we post it on our website. Either way, you can share it with friends or colleagues. If anyone out there is looking for more information about purchasing co-ops, chances are you're already part of one, but maybe you're interested to learn more, you can, of course, contact me. My email is my first initial, B, and then my last name, Munson, M-U-N-S-O-N, @ ncba.coop. I encourage all of you to subscribe to our Co-op Weekly e-newsletter, and would request that you run the request to your co-op for them to join us at the Impact Conference. Gary and his team will be there. Again, that conference will be in Washington, D.C., October 4th through the 6th this fall. Gary, unless you have anything else, it's been my pleasure to moderate the webinar today, and I just want to thank everyone again for their time. Any parting words?
No, except that I wanted to first thank everybody for listening in. I hope that it was helpful to the people that listened. If they have any questions, they can contact you or me.
Yep.
You know, there's
a
lot of businesses that need help, and we just want to be a resource for them.
Good. All right. Well, we appreciate it. We appreciate everything that you do. And again, thanks for everybody on the line for joining us today, for your attention. You guys have a great rest of your day. And Gary, I'll just give you a shout after this on that 317 number, and we can catch up. Thanks again, everyone. Appreciate it.
All right. Bye, all. Thank you all.